The world outside was drowning in fog. Inside, something worse was happening. San Francisco's skyline blurred into nothingness that night. I stood in the silent dark, bourbon heavy in my hand, watching headlights vanish into the mist. Veronica's laughter once filled this house. Now it was a polite absence, a sterile echo. Her charity gala excuses had multiplied. Her luxury watch, once left on the nightstand, now traveled everywhere. Small things they said nothing on their own. Together they whispered. At first, I told myself it was the stress. Long hours, too many deadlines, an endless parade of meaningless obligations. But stress doesn't smell like expensive cologne clinging to the folds of her jacket. Stress doesn't erase the easy tenderness from someone's voice, leaving only brittle politeness behind. That night, as the fog thickened outside, it seeped inside too. It wrapped around the spaces between us, filling the gaps we refused to name. I tried to pretend it was fine. I poured another drink. I scrolled through meaningless headlines. I waited for the sound of her keys in the lock. But even the familiar creak of the front door had changed. Slower, hesitant, like the house itself was unsure how to greet her. Veronica appeared in the doorway, haloed by the glow of the streetlights trapped in mist. Her silhouette was perfect, curated, hair smooth, makeup flawless, the hem of her gown brushing the threshold like a practiced performance. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile you wear for strangers, not the man waiting for you with a hollowed-out heart. "You're up late," she said, voice light, almost mechanical. I smiled back, a reflex more than a choice. Couldn't sleep, neither could my doubts. I watched her as she floated upstairs, each footfall deliberate, careful, like she was moving through a house that didn't quite belong to her anymore, like she didn't want to wake the past. The bourbon burned on the way down, but not enough. Not enough to silence the memory of the way she used to kiss me when she came home, dropping her keys, her purse, her whole self into my arms without thinking. Now her touch was rationed. Her time, an expense account I could barely afford. On the kitchen counter, her phone buzzed. Once, she would have tossed it aside, screen face up, laughing at cat videos or sending silly memes. Tonight, she snatched it up as if it were a live grenade, cradling it to her chest before disappearing down the hall. I sat there for a long time, the glass sweating in my hand, the fog pressing against the windows like a secret trying to get in. It wasn't one thing. It never is. It was the thousand tiny fractures, the micro-expressions, the absences too small to name until they weren't. The first hairline crack had appeared. And once you see the first, you start seeing them everywhere. Numbers don't lie. People do. It was supposed to be routine. Just a quarterly review, a glance at our accounts, the dull click of spreadsheets unfolding their silent stories. But there it was, a single-line item standing out like blood on white cloth. $50,000. Transferred to an unfamiliar LLC. Authorized by Veronica. I stared at the screen, waiting for the numbers to rearrange themselves into something innocent. A forgotten investment. A business expense. A favor she meant to tell me about. But the name attached to the transfer hit me like a slow-motion punch. Her father's company. The one gasping for breath after a decade of bad decisions and worse debts. She hadn't mentioned a word. Not over late-night dinners. Not during the Sunday drives when we talked about everything and nothing. Not even in the brittle, careful conversations we had recently perfected. The ones where we navigated around each other like ships pretending they weren't sinking. It wasn't the money that set my teeth on edge. We had enough. More than enough. It was the omission, deliberate, precise. A scalpel sliding between ribs, unseen until you breathe wrong. I closed the laptop carefully, as if the betrayal might shatter it. There was an old saying my grandfather used to mutter over his whiskey. When truth rots, you can smell it before you see it. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Confrontations are for people hoping to salvage something. I wasn't even sure there was anything left to save. Instead, I waited. I watched. I learned the rhythm of her lies the way sailors learn the tides. By the way she paused before answering simple questions. By the sudden fascination with her phone she never used to guard. I even started cataloging the signs, like a quiet collector of my own undoing. Late nights disguised as urgent meetings. The sudden shudder in her voice when I asked about her father. The smell of expensive wine she claimed she'd given up. Truth doesn't vanish all at once. It unspools slowly, painfully, until even breathing feels dishonest. One evening she came home, the fog swirling around her like a reluctant accomplice. She kissed my cheek too lightly, told me she missed me. Her earrings, small, platinum, new, caught the kitchen light, glittering like warning flares. I kissed her back, feeling the hollowness beneath her skin. I asked about her day. She smiled, lied, moved on, and I filed it away, another bead on the growing rosary of deception. I had been stupid enough to believe numbers lived in ledgers, safe and clean. But numbers only tell you what happened. It's people who turn them into weapons. And someone I once loved was using them against me. Trust leaves doors open. I started closing them. The first betrayal wasn't the transfer. It wasn't the late nights or the distant kisses. It was the password. Her laptop sat open on the coffee table one evening, casual as a bowl of fruit. Veronica upstairs, humming in the shower, unaware. I didn't plan to snoop. I told myself that as my hand moved almost involuntarily, fingers brushing the trackpad. The login screen blinked at me, requesting a password I used to know. I typed it anyway, muscle memory leading the way. Her birthday. Our anniversary. The name of the restaurant where I proposed. Wrong. 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 My stomach didn't twist. It calcified, a dead, heavy thing inside me. Veronica had never locked me out before. Not when we were struggling to pay off student loans. Not when we shared one battered laptop between us, trading it back and forth like a joint bank account of dreams. The screen glowed, indifferent, waiting for a key I no longer held. Upstairs, the water shut off. Her humming stopped. I stepped away from the laptop as if it were radioactive, forcing my face into something that looked casual. Normal. But something inside me had shifted, irreversible. She hadn't just changed a password. She had changed the terms of our reality. There were now rooms in her mind I wasn't allowed to enter. Conversations I wasn't meant to overhear. Dreams I wasn't part of anymore. Later, lying beside her in the dim hush of our bedroom, I stared at the ceiling, counting the tiny cracks I had never noticed before. Each one a hairline fracture in the story we had once written together. Trust had left the doors open. Now, quietly, ruthlessly, I began to close them. I stopped asking where she was going. I stopped pretending I didn't notice when she turned her phone screen away. I stopped filling the silence with excuses meant to protect her. Or me. In the morning, she laughed over coffee, scrolling through her private world. I smiled back, my own smile hollow enough to echo. She thought she was keeping secrets. She didn't realize secrets keep themselves eventually. All you have to do is listen to the quiet. And the quiet was getting louder. I was no longer a husband. I was a strategist. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. While Veronica's breathing steadied beside me, soft and measured like nothing was broken, I lay awake tracing patterns on the ceiling with my eyes, lines, angles, probabilities. Somewhere between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m., I stopped being her husband. I became something else. A strategist. Not out of bitterness. Not yet. But because love, when cornered, either begs or plans. And I was done begging. I got up without making a sound. By morning, everything had changed. The passwords to our joint accounts, cloud backups, even the home security panel, all rewritten. Complex, impersonal strings she would never guess. I froze the equity access. Changed the safe code. And quietly, I retained a new legal team. Discreet. Untraceable to her social circle. Professionals who specialize in disentangling lives sewn together with shared tax filings and carefully curated photographs. Then came the surveillance. Our security system had been more aesthetic than functional, a couple of sleek cameras with more style than substance. I changed that. New logs. New storage. Off-site backups. Silent witnesses programmed to notice what I no longer could afford to ignore. By the time the sun scraped the fog from our windows, I had built a new framework. One where her lies wouldn't just hurt. They'd have consequences. Veronica emerged from the bedroom glowing like a woman on the right side of a secret. She moved through the kitchen with ease, kissed my cheek with lips that tasted of vanilla and theater. I smiled back, not because I felt warmth, but because I understood now. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a phase. This was a game. And she thought I hadn't noticed the opening move. She made small talk over toast, a new yoga class, a podcast about wellness. I nodded, played my part, let her move her pieces. I wasn't here to stop her anymore. I was here to watch, record, prepare. To build a playbook of her every deception until I could walk away with the one thing she thought I'd never take, the truth. And maybe, if I was careful, the upper hand. Because love is patient. But betrayal? Betrayal learns how to read the rules before it rewrites them. She lied so easily, it almost felt like love. "How's your dad?" I asked over dinner. The question landed softly like a feather brushing glass, but the tension it stirred was immediate. "Good. Busy," she chirped. "Too fast. Too bright." The kind of answer someone gives when they think the truth is fragile and must be avoided. She didn't meet my eyes. Instead, she swirled her wine, watching it spiral like something hypnotic. The glass caught the light just enough to distract from her pupils, dilated, cornered. She was lying. Not in the clumsy way people lie when they're panicked. No, this was smoother. Like a story she'd practiced in the mirror. And I realized then, this wasn't her first lie. It wasn't even her first lie tonight. It was just the first one I caught in real time. Her bracelet, the one I bought her in Paris during a trip we both swore we'd never forget, slipped from her wrist. It fell between us with a soft clink. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and didn't care. She kept talking about her dad's consulting work and a possible merger. Words that sounded important. Words meant to fill space. The bracelet stayed there, untouched. A small, glittering corpse between the pasta and the Pinot Noir. A memory she no longer recognized. A gift she no longer wanted. A symbol she didn't even notice she had lost. I watched her, letting her finish the story, this carefully stitched fiction about a man I knew was drowning in debt. The same man she wired $50,000 to. The same man she hadn't seen in months. She laughed at her own lie, a little too loud, a little too rehearsed. And I smiled back. Because if I didn't, I might have said something I couldn't unsay. I picked up the bracelet. Held it in my hand. She didn't reach for it. "Miss this," I said casually. "Oh," she murmured, blinking like she was returning from somewhere else. "Thanks." She didn't put it back on. Later that night, I placed it quietly in my drawer next to the external hard drive and the manila folder I had started filling with timelines, receipts, and whispers. She could keep lying. That was fine. Because lies are like shadows. The more light you shine, the more they stretch. And I was finally learning how to hold the flashlight steady. Every empire crumbles from within first. I used to believe betrayal wore lipstick and perfume. That it came with late nights and suspicious texts, with fading intimacy and quiet withdrawals. I was wrong. Real betrayal wears a suit. It uses business language. It signs NDAs and drafts proposals. And sometimes it signs your name at the bottom. I found them after midnight, buried deep in a folder disguised as an HR compliance archive. Veronica's laptop hadn't given me much, but her cloud backup had. She never thought I'd go looking where she did her real damage. Emails. Between her and Noah Prescott. A name I recognized too well, a venture capitalist with too many teeth in his smile and just enough equity in my company to be dangerous. I used to think he was a little too impressed with my wife. Turns out she was a little too impressed with his offer. They were clever. The emails never said affair. They said things like vertical integration and liquid leverage. But beneath the gloss, the truth oozed through. They were planning my company's collapse. Strategically. Efficiently. With precision and charm, like surgeons removing organs I didn't know were infected. They framed it like vision. An elegant exit strategy. I staged burn with soft landing optics. A new venture positioned on the ashes of the old. My company, my life's work, reduced to a controlled demolition for someone else's rebuild. And Veronica? She wasn't a bystander. She was the match. In one thread, she floated the idea of a fake military contract, one with ballooning costs and phantom deliverables. If we seed it into Q3, she wrote, the bleed will look organic. Legal won't blink. My stomach clenched. Not because she was smart. Because she was using her intelligence to dismantle the house we built together, brick by brick. And she had once told me she believed in me. That my vision was the only thing that made sense in a senseless world. I remember her saying that. I even wrote it down once, stupidly, in a journal I can't bring myself to look at anymore. Now I watched her rewrite our future in bullet points and blind copies. She wasn't just cheating. She was conspiring. Weaponizing my trust with the precision of someone who had never truly loved, only studied the blueprint of affection for exploitable flaws. By morning I had printed every thread. Flagged every date. Labeled every lie. The evidence sat in a file marked inheritance. Because that's what betrayal leaves behind, not wounds. Not rage. Just ashes. And when the empire finally crumbles, it won't be the collapse that breaks you. It's knowing who helped set the charges. There are things you cannot unlearn. There are thresholds you never return from. There was no rage, no yelling, no broken glass, just silence, and a spreadsheet. I moved methodically, the way you disinfect a wound, layer by painful layer, knowing full well you're peeling away more than infection. I wasn't reacting. I was designing an exit. Not from the marriage, from the trap. First came the trustees. Names I trusted, people who had no idea why they were being promoted to quiet positions of power. Then the accounts. Dissolved quietly, one at a time. No red flags. No sudden moves. Just balance transfers and strategic reallocation. Next were the firings. Subtle. Targeted. The ones Veronica had cozied up to at conferences. The ones who lingered too long in her orbit, the weak links with bright smiles and loose tongues. Gone. And not one of them saw it coming. Because I played dumb. Because I smiled while I packed the matches. I kept her coffee hot. Kissed her cheek. Listened to her talk about Pilates and overpriced light therapy. Every word was theater. Every look a mask. I knew what was coming. She didn't. The emails between her and Noah had given me everything, including their schedule. Noah, ever the tactician, had laid out the divorce plan like a war briefing. Phase 1, undermine control. Phase 2, leverage public sympathy. Phase 3, file from higher ground. He wrote it like she was an asset, a pawn in a hostile acquisition. And she, in her arrogance, played right into it, smiling at me over wine, scripting her betrayal as if I couldn't read subtext. But their plan had become my roadmap. And every step they plotted, I walked backwards, burning the trail behind me. By the time they were ready to strike, I was already gone. The Veronica they thought they knew, the compliant husband, the absent-minded builder, the man too in love to notice the poison, didn't exist anymore. He died the night she lied about her father. He was buried under the emails she forgot to delete. And me? I became something else. Not bitter. Not broken. Just done. There are things you cannot unlearn. Like the sound of your name in someone else's plan. There are thresholds you never return from. Like the moment you realize you were never loved, only used well. And so I smiled. I toasted her glass. And I watched her walk toward the cliff edge. Never realizing the ground had already been removed. I let them come. I let them believe they had one. She rang the doorbell like a guest. Like someone unsure of their place in a house they used to own. I opened the door slowly, careful to look surprised, not hurt. Never hurt. That chapter had ended weeks ago, sealed between folders and contingency clauses. Veronica stood there in a blazer too sharp for comfort, holding a manila envelope like it was something sacred. Her hands shook. Barely. A tremor, not a quake. She was scared, not of what she was doing, but of how little I might react. Behind her, parked too close to the curb, was a rented Maserati. Noah leaned on it, sunglasses on despite the cloud cover. He was grinning like the villain in a poorly written play. I almost laughed. I took the envelope. Smiled. Thanks, I said. Calm. Even. Like she was handing me a menu, not a missile. She blinked, thrown off. She had rehearsed this. Expected anger. A slammed door. A desperate question. But not this. Not me, cool, polite, already gone. She turned to leave without a word. Noah gave me a mock salute before slipping back into the car. I watched them drive away, their victory parade staged for an audience that no longer existed. Then I closed the door. And I exhaled. Because inside that envelope, behind the summons and the polished accusations, was nothing. No assets. No shares. No leverage. The house was already transferred to a trust. The company stock? Divested into voting proxies and locked under terms she didn't know existed. The accounts? Relocated. Separated. Ring-fenced with legal firewalls. Everything she thought she was entitled to had been quietly, methodically emptied. And what remained? Only her own betrayal. Mirrored back at her in the sterile language of legal indifference. No accusations. No dramatic counters. Just absence, the same absence she had practiced in our marriage, now staring back from every clause. I imagined her reading it beside Noah, her fingers flipping pages in growing confusion. Imagined his smirk faltering as he realized the crown they thought they'd stolen was made of ash. I didn't need to burn their empire. I just removed the oxygen. And in the silence that followed, I felt something unexpected, not triumph. Not even closure. Just stillness. The kind that comes when a detonation goes off exactly as planned. Quiet. Precise. And irreversible. Victories are never clean. They say when a building collapses, the dust lingers longer than the sound. It hangs in the air. Clings to your clothes. Stays in your lungs long after the echo fades. That's how it felt in the weeks that followed. Noah's funding evaporated almost overnight. Investors, the fair-weather kind, caught scent of instability and vanished like smoke. Clauses activated. Partnerships dissolved. Suddenly, all those whispered new ventures were radioactive. Veronica screamed behind closed doors. The walls she'd leaned on for her fresh start began to fracture. It started with a breach of contract lawsuit from a former vendor, a harmless fly, until the media noticed the scent of blood. Then came an SEC inquiry triggered by a flagged proposal buried in their fake military contract, a proposal I had quietly handed to a former associate with a taste for justice. I didn't gloat. I didn't interfere. I simply disappeared, erased myself from their narrative like an old watermark. Every trace of me, every photograph, signature tied to the architecture of their plans had been dismantled. Legally, quietly, completely. They were left chasing ghosts. Dead ends. Locked drawers. By the time Veronica tried to reach me again, the number was disconnected. The house was under a trust name. The office lease had changed hands. I watched it all unfold from far away, not in distance, but in intent. I didn't celebrate, because victories like this aren't celebrations. They're cauterizations. Necessary, painful, permanent. My wealth was intact. My company secure. My name unscathed. But my heart? That was something else entirely. It hadn't healed. It had hardened. Where once there was ache, there was now a clean, cold space like a room no longer lived in. I kept it locked. Not out of fear, but because I'd seen what happens when you leave the door open. Let them rebuild if they can. Let them tell whatever story helps them sleep. I left no forwarding address. No vindictive manifesto. Just silence. And the ruins they made together. Some victories are silent. The lake didn't move much at first. Just a soft tremble as the mist rolled across it, the way breath fogs a mirror. Slow. Weightless. Indifferent. I sat on the dock, bourbon cradled in one hand, the other resting on my knee. My luxury watch ticked, steady and precise, a hollow metronome counting time I no longer cared to measure. Once it meant status. Success. Now it was just metal and movement. No different than the wind rustling the pine needles. There was no phone beside me. No signal. No texts blinking in the corner of my vision like bombs waiting to go off. Just water. Just silence. Just the soft groan of old wood beneath my chair and the quiet knowledge that no one knew exactly where I was, not even the people who used to love me. I'd given everything once. Every hour, every ounce of belief, every word that felt like truth. I had emptied myself for people who saw me as architecture, something useful to build their futures inside of, until they decided the walls were no longer pretty. And when it ended, they thought they had taken the house. What they didn't know is I had been the foundation. They could fight over the furniture. I took the ground with me. Yeah? Now I give nothing to anyone who hasn't earned it. The cabin, quiet, minimal, honest, felt more like home than any mansion Veronica had staged with glossy catalogs and carefully lit mirrors. There were no lies here. No exit strategies. No side eyes across dinner tables. Just the air, and my breathing, and the faint creak of the dock leaning into the water like it wanted to disappear too. Alone, but not lonely. Loneliness is a hunger. Solitude is a choice. I chose this, not because I lost faith in people, but because I lost faith in the versions of myself that used to chase their love like currency. Now I sit in the stillness. Let the fog drift. Let the past stay buried. No apologies. No explanations. Just the sound of water. And a heart that finally beats for no one's agenda but mine. Stripped of illusion. And finally free.